Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have a very interesting guest with me today. I have Keith and Aviva, who were both hostages in Gaza. Hello, and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Hello.
So, my understanding is that you were both victims of October 7th. And for those of you who don't know what October 7th is, I don't know why you wouldn't, but it was basically Hamas's invasion into Israel when they killed some Israeli citizens at a concert. And then on the way back to Gaza, they took some hostages. And you were two of the hostages that were taken. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, Aviva, you were originally from South Africa, but you actually moved to Israel when you were 9. Can you tell me about that?
Well, my parents felt that South Africa isn't the best country to raise kids. So they moved to Israel, and we lived on a kibbutz, a different kibbutz Orah. It's a beautiful community. Kibbutzim in Israel is one of the best places to grow up in. I just rode horses and played with dogs and ran on the grass and had lots of friends. And it was just such a beautiful life. And when I got married to Keith, we moved to Kibbutz Gaza, and we've been living there for more than 40 years. A very, very pleasant, beautiful place. When you wake up in the morning, the birds wake you up. And unfortunately, we went through the 7th of October, but I just want to tell you that Gaza has had missiles from Gaza for more than 20 years. And at the beginning, I used to hear them because they whistle when they send them from Gaza. I used to hide behind trees to save my lives. And I was always worried about Keith and the kids. And so this terrible time being a neighbor of Gaza that had been so mean for many, many years. We suffered for so many years.
So tell me, what was your story, Keith? So you were actually from the US and you made Aliyah.
Yes, I just want to ask, is your audience going to see the video or just hear the recording audio?
They'll see the video.
Okay. So can you please repeat your question? So
you also made Aliyah to Israel, and you were from the US. Can you tell me a bit about your history?
Yes, I was born and raised in the US. I grew up in a traditional Jewish family. Israel was always very important to my parents, and conveying that to me and my siblings. And I participated in a 6-week program in Israel, American Jewish youth, for 6 weeks, and I fell in love with Israel. I experienced something that I had never felt before. And I decided that this is where I belong. This is the country where I want to live my life.
Now, obviously, October 7th happened, and you were taken. I believe you were taken from your home. Can you tell me how it all happened?
Yes, well, we've had these rockets, and we had the alarm at 6:30 in the morning. Keith and I ran with our pajamas to our little bomb shelter in the house. And many, many times, most of the times before that, we used to run and not close the door, not close the window, because we don't have any time. It happens in seconds. And so we ran and we sat there for a second. There were 2 alarms. And after 2, we went out of the little shelter because we thought it was finished. But unfortunately, from the window from our daughter's room, we could see all the rockets going all over. There were millions of them. It was very loud. I was scared. I was shaking. And then we had another alarm. We ran back, and then we closed the door and closed the window. And we didn't even lock them because we didn't think that anything like what happened would happen in our home, in our kibbutz. And very shortly, we understood that there's terrorists on the kibbutz. And very shortly, we heard the Arabic from outside, and in such a brutal way, 15 Hamas terrorists just walked into our house and took us, pulled us. They tore Keith's shirt. They pushed Keith. They broke his ribs. They shot him on his hand while they took us out of the back window of the house, and they tore my knee, meniscus of my knee. So we were injured at the beginning, and we were taken to Gaza with a gun in front of us, a knife in front of us, and immediately taken underneath the ground.
And Aviva,
Into a tunnel.
you were one of the first released. Is that correct? So Keith was in there longer than yourself.
Well, I wasn't the first. There were people that were released before me, and I was released on the 51 day. That's 7 weeks and 2 days. And I'm lucky because I was with Keith, and Keith helped me because I'm very, very scared. And after 51 days, I was released on a deal of the woman and the children and came home.
And Keith, yourself?
I spent a total of 484 days in captivity. I was released on the 1st of February of this year. Also, as part of an agreement signed between Israel and Hamas, mediated by Egypt and Qatar and the United States. I spent half a year alone, and I was relocated. I was moved around 33 times. I spent time in tunnels. I spent time in schools, in homes, and in apartments. I spent extended periods of time with around 60 Hamas terrorists total, being moved and relocated. I was kicked, I was spat on, I was cursed for no reason whatsoever. I just did exactly what they told me to do, which was to lie on my back on the floor. Came up to me for I had not said anything, I had not done anything except to do what they told me to do. And I experienced that severe violence day after day. And I also witnessed a woman hostage being tortured. They were beating her. They were stabbing her with a sharp metal rod in her forehead as she was lying on her back on the floor with her mouth covered with tape and her hands bound together and her feet bound together. And they were accusing her of something that was totally irrelevant and telling me to tell her to confess. And I knew she had nothing to confess to. I then saw her being threatened with death as they put a pistol up to her head, and the terrorist said he was going to kill her if she didn't confess, as they had put her down on her knees on the floor. I mentioned before I was alone for 6 months total, and I was locked up in a room by myself, no windows, dark. I spent time in captivity together with 4 hostages that still remain in captivity. And today marks 685 days of captivity for these friends of mine, 4 friends of mine that I spent extended periods of time with in captivity, each one separately. And one of them was critically injured on the 7th of October. An Israeli soldier, a tank driver named Matan. We were locked together. We were locked up in a room, just the 2 of us. This is Matan. He's now 22 years old. I met Matan in the middle of December of 2023. He had severe burns on his arms and his hands, injuries that had not become, what's the word? His burns and his injuries were still open. They were still open, and they had become infected.
Healed. They hadn't closed, yeah.
They hadn't healed, yes, exactly. And This was a year and a half ago when we were separated, when the terrorists took him to a different location and they took me to a different location. And another two men that I was with, three men that I was with in captivity. Two of them are twin brothers from our community of Gaza. They're the best of friends. They have never been separated in their life. Hamas kidnapped them together on the 7th of October and separated them.
Mm.
And I spent time with both of them, but separately. They were also injured. And their father is severely ill with Parkinson's and dementia. He's an invalid in a wheelchair. And their mother takes care of him.
Mm.
And I spent time with another man named Omri Miran, and he's the father of two daughters, aged 4 and 2. Two young daughters that were aged 2 and 6 months when they saw him being kidnapped before their eyes. His wife and his two daughters saw them being kidnapped by the terrorists violently and taken, and that's the last they've seen or heard of him, except for some videos that Hamas released.
So I just want to just talk about Alon Oil. He's been underneath the ground for nearly 2 years. And when he was kidnapped, pieces of grenade that the Hamas threw at him are in his eyes, and he's going blind. And they're not even human enough to take out the pieces of the grenade out of his eyes. And I just want to say that Gali and Zivi are from Kibbutz Kfar Aza, from our community, and knowing that they're kept, maybe alone, starved, because we were starved, Keith and I. Keith lost more than 30 kilos. I lost 10 kilos while I was in captivity. And I just want to say that being starved was nothing compared to the way they treated us in such a brutal way all the time. They pulled my hair, they pushed me, they threatened me with a gun. They threatened Keith and the girls with me. I'm a witness of one of the girls that Hamas terrorist just did whatever he wanted. He touched her whole body. And she's young. She's never been touched before, maybe. And after he did that, she had to continue to smile as if nothing happened, because he threatened her. If she ever opens her mouth and tells us, he will kill her. And seeing the girl that Keith was talking about that was threatened also to be killed if she doesn't say the truth, I want to say that for me as a human being, seeing them torture the girls, torture Keith, was one of the hardest things that a person can go through, because I couldn't help. I couldn't shout for them. The only thing that I was allowed to do is to look in their eyes and comfort them with my love. I wasn't allowed to hug. We weren't allowed to talk most of the time. Sometimes we were allowed to whisper, and all human rights were taken away. One of the times they took us underneath the ground, and Keith and I and another girl that was with us
into a tunnel.
We're walking and walking and walking and walking, hardly finding the way to put our next foot because it was dark. And when we arrived to this little niche, they just left us there. They left us there because there was no oxygen for us to breathe. And after more than a couple of days of hardly no water and no food, Keith looked at me and said that he feels that he can't breathe. He was trying to collect a little bit of the air that there was there. And I was proud that he told me that he can't breathe, because I felt exactly the same, but didn't have the guts to say that. I was scared to look at Keith. I was scared to look at Keith dead. And in my mind, I thought, how's it going to feel like dying? So I touched death with Keith and another girl at 40 meters underneath the ground, just left alone. And the morning that one of the terrorists came down, he could see the conditions that we were just lying and trying to keep ourselves alive. And he looked at us and he said, sorry, no house. And that was a moment that I separated from life. And that afternoon, when he came down and said, get dressed, because they used to tell us to get dressed looking like Arabs. We got dressed and we were out. I'll never forget that moment. Standing next to Keith and the girl with us, looking at the sky and saying to myself, I've got air, I'm going to live. And we do know that there's 50 hostages that are still in Gaza. 20 of them are still alive. We don't know how they're treating them, but we do know because we saw Evyatar, one of the hostages, just a couple of weeks ago. He looks like a skeleton. He's lost so much weight.
Is that
and
the
they
guy that
told him,
was on he was circulating on Twitter? Is that the guy they made digging his own grave?
yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that starving and being thin is just a little bit of what Keith and I went through and what the hostages are going through. The hostages are hidden underneath the ground in tunnels, treated like they're not even human. They used to eat in front of us while they starved us. Not once and not twice. We didn't get food for 24 hours. And when we did get food after 24 hours, we got a little piece of pita. So pita bread, I used to hide food for Keith because I saw Keith losing weight. And Keith looked at me and he said, you're losing weight too. You must eat. And I said, no, Keith, I'm keeping it for you. Because one of the times when he got up to go to the bathroom, he fell. He was so weak. And for me, as his wife, seeing him so thin and so fragile, and the way they treated him was one of the worst things that I'll ever go through in my life. And now thinking about Gali and Zivi and Alon and Omri and Matan and all the hostages that are still there, some of them we know that are ill, some of them are injured, just like Alon Oil that's going blind. We need to do everything we can as humans, not to allow anybody go through what they're going through.
So, can you tell me a little bit about what the Hamas operatives would say to you? What would they accuse you of? Did they ever speak in a language you understood? Did they say anything to you?
When I was there, one of them, he tried to teach a little bit Hebrew, like when he used to tell us to keep quiet or to sit or to lie down or to move or to get up. So we taught him a little bit of words, but Keith luckily knew a little bit of Arabic, and that really, really, really helped us. And Keith can talk for himself, but when he was in captivity, he learned a lot of Arabic to communicate with them. But I didn't. They treated me and Keith and the girls like nobody should be treated. We were threatened so many times, and so many minutes I was sure that I'm going to die, and see Keith dead. When Keith used to say that he needs to go to the bathroom, I used to tell him just for 1 second because I was scared. One of the times they took him and asked him many, many questions. And when he came back, he told me what they asked and what he answered, because he wanted me, if they asked me, to say the same things, like who is his friends on the kibbutz, where do they live. He had to write down a map where they live, maybe. And it was just terrible. They used to, one of the times when I took my foot out of the blanket because I was hot, the Hamas terrorist came and threatened me and started screaming at me that I'm not allowed to do something like that. And, you know, when I say that, it doesn't sound so bad, but just think that's the amount of control that Hamas had on us. We weren't allowed to do anything, move. I wasn't allowed to cry when they threatened Keith. So I used to hide myself. I used to lie down, put my hand on my face and cry with them not saying, with them not seeing me, because we weren't allowed. We weren't allowed to hug. We weren't allowed to communicate. We weren't allowed to help each other. And we just went through worse and worse times all the time, and coming out after 51 days and leaving Keith there, knowing what he's going through, was terrible, just terrible.
So Keith, from your perspective, what do you think of the world's response to the hostages? Because as we've seen, October 7th happened, I think a day after it in the United Kingdom, they started to protest against Israel's response. Even before Israel had responded, they had similar events in New York City where they were protesting Israel's response before Israel had even responded. And now there seems to be more focus on starvation in Palestine than the remaining hostages. What's your view of how the world has responded to this?
Hamas attacked Israel on October the 7th. They were the ones that initiated this attack and started this war. They killed over 1,200 people on October the 7th, including babies, elderly, women, and men. They also kidnapped over 250 babies, children, elderly women, and men. They kidnapped dead people in order to use them as bargaining chips to release Palestinian prisoners that had been sentenced in Israeli jails because of terror attacks that they had committed. They killed hostages in captivity, murdered them. They also, a family in our community of around 800 people, they murdered the whole family. They had killed the mother and the father and the children after that. They murdered the mother and the father of 3 children. One of their daughters, aged 3, ran away from home to a neighbor. The neighbor took her in to protect her. And then Hamas, the terrorists, they kidnapped the mother, the 3 kids, and this 3-year-old child that had witnessed her mother and father being murdered in front of her eyes and had run away from home. Her brother and sister, aged, I believe,
7 and 9.
7 and 9, hid in a closet in a cupboard for over 14 hours, knowing that their parents had been murdered and they were lying in the house. The 2 of them hid in a cupboard while on the phone with a psychologist until they were rescued after so long.
There were 2 twins, baby twins, 9 months old, that were left in the same crib for 19 hours after they killed the father and the mother in front of them. And I just want to say that many mothers were raped in front of their families, and then they killed the mother, and they killed the family afterwards. And in the Nova,
The music festival,
the Hamas terrorists stood in a line to rape the girls in front of the boyfriends, killed them, and played soccer with part of their bodies. And what happened on the 7th is more than a war. They were so proud of themselves. They took pictures of what they did, and seeing the world standing up for Hamas and what they did and what they're doing. If everybody in the world will just open their eyes and listen and think about their loved ones that would go through something like that, I'm sure that they would understand that it's the wrong way to treat people. The starvation in Gaza is very bad. Keith and I are against it. We're peacemakers. But we do want to say that Hamas is responsible of their people. If they give back our 50 hostages, that we know of 20 of them that are still alive and begging to get out of there, hidden, starved, torched. We know of hostages that were chained. We know of hostages that were in cages. That's not a way to treat anybody. I think and know that in any jail in the world, nobody is treated as bad as Keith and I and the hostages are treated. And the world is keeping quiet. Most of the world doesn't even believe it. So I want to wake up the world. It's not the way that any human being should be treated. What they're doing is the worst thing that any human being should go through.
Mm. What's your feeling now in Israel? Do you still feel like it's your home? Do you still want to stay there?
I'm proud to be a Jew. I'm proud to be part of the country. I've been in demonstrations that 500,000 of people have been standing for the hostages and for human rights. And there's so many people that are doing everything they can. Keith and I belong to the family of hostages, of the 251 hostages that were kidnapped. We all together are feeling, and everybody is doing everything they can. I have traveled 22 times in the last 2 years to bring Keith and the girls that I was with out. And now, doing the same for Gali and Zivi, I'm shouting for Tali, their mom, that's not able to get out of bed in the morning. She's finished. 2 of her children are hidden. And I just want to say that for 1 year and 2 months, when I fought for Keith and the girls, people used to ask me, have you heard anything about Keith? And I used to say to them, I don't even know if Keith is alive.
Mm.
I'm lucky. Keith is lucky. We're sitting here. We're alive. We've got oxygen to breathe, air to breathe. We've got food on the table. But Gali and Zivi don't have anything. Just like we didn't have anything. All we did, day after day, is lay down on a filthy, dirty mattress. Keith, for 484 days. And these hostages that are still there, the world needs to stand up for them and say, no, things like this can't happen. By letting Hamas win and keeping them means that anybody can do anything they want to. They can rape girls when they want to. They can burn people alive. That's what happened in so many of the houses on Kibbutz Kfar Aza, Kibbutz Be'eri, Kibbutz Nir Oz, and other places. They burnt families and babies alive. They played soccer with parts of body, and they showed that to the world because they were proud of themselves. Who would do something like that? So I don't think they're human, but I do know that the good needs to win. The evil should be not allowed. And Keith and I are sitting here in the land of freedom. What Mandela did for this country. You know, when I left when I was 9 years old, nobody was sitting around me in a restaurant that was with a dark skin. And now sitting in a restaurant with people of all colors, my heart was exploding with joy. And I just want to say that Keith and I don't look like the people that have dark hair, but the inside of us, we do. We have the same heart and the same inside of the bodies. And there's so many good people all over the world that are with us, the Christian people that Keith and I want to really, really thank, because they're good people. They've got hearts and they want our hostages out, and they're also doing everything they can to help us. So we want to say thank you to everybody that's listening to us and standing for human rights and standing for us. We need to be proud of ourselves that we're good people, and we need to bring the bad people to understand that only the good should win.
So the South African government obviously issued a ICJ case against Israel for its response against Hamas. And Durko itself seems to be very pro-aligned to Hamas. They actually set up an office in Cape Town for Hamas. So they have a liaison office there, and they've had a lot of, should we say, inter-dialogue between the two governments. What's your view on that?
I just want to say, I also want to say thank you for this opportunity to tell our story and to speak on behalf of the 50 hostages that I'm showing their pictures to you now, that have been in captivity for 685 days. Innocent people, a woman, elderly people, people that did nothing wrong, that did nothing to the Palestinian people. They were kidnapped, they've been tortured, some of them were murdered. And I think any person that believes in morality and in humanity should feel a responsibility for speaking out against the atrocities committed by Hamas and the continuing holding of these innocent people for so long, not even letting anybody know how their condition is. From time to time, releasing propaganda videos where the hostages are told what to say, the way I was. Hamas did a video of me and told me what I should say of us. And that's the only opportunities of even seeing some of these people. Some of them, like the twin brothers, there hasn't been any sign of life for them except for hostages that spend time with them that have been released. I think the cruelty and the barbaric behavior that goes against any international law of how to treat people, and even in a war, people must speak out against this. I cannot understand why Hamas is continuing to cause suffering to the Palestinians as well in Gaza. If Hamas were to release the hostages, this war could be stopped and bring an end to the suffering of their own people and our people and everybody. And I think also we have an opportunity of bringing peace to the region. And I think people that believe in peace should speak out for peace, for reaching an agreement that will bring safety, peace, stability, and the end of suffering for people in Gaza and Israel and the region.
I want to just say that all the people, the leaders that are against getting the hostages out and are doing everything for Hamas, I want them to come and look in my eyes and say that it's okay what the Hamas did to Keith and I, and what they're doing to Evyatar, and what they did to the girls, touched them, raped them. If that's okay, if that's what they want for their children or for the next generations to go through, they should come and listen to us, be brave enough to come and listen to the good people, not to the bad people. What they're doing is wrong. By standing for Hamas, knowing what Hamas did, it's something that they'll never ever understand. We need to stand up and say no. There's things that should never ever be allowed. To torture Keith, he's 66 years old, was kidnapped when he was 64. To kick him, to spit at him, to treat him like they treated him, to leave him sleeping on stairs for 2 weeks and not allowing him to go to the toilet during the day, not giving him any water that he won't need to go to the toilet. When I was there and I was sick because I had a temp, because I was sick, I had a stomach infection, they didn't give me water. They didn't give Keith water. I used to beg, and Keith used to beg just for a couple of sips of water. We are lucky. We are so lucky to be alive. So many of ours just died, weren't able to even survive. And we are talking for them. We're going around the world, talking wherever we can. Just a couple of weeks ago, we went to England. We spoke there in the parliament. We spoke to people that don't believe us, that think maybe that we're crazy with our stories. I want them to look in my eyes, and all the people that don't believe us, to say that it's okay to play soccer with body parts and to be proud and to take heads off of people just because they feel like it.
Mm.
I was told over and over again in captivity that only Muslims go to heaven. They were trying to convince me to convert to Islam, and they would say that again and again. Only Muslims go to heaven. Everybody else goes to hell.
Mm.
So I just feel like if that's the way these people think about other people, just based on their religion, it's, you know, I guess maybe it explains their behavior, why they treat people that are not Muslims the way they do. And I just want to say that Hamas terrorists kidnapped not only Jews on October the 7th, they kidnapped many Thais, Buddhists, Christians, people of all religions.
Muslims.
Muslims as well. Yes, of course. So what does this say? What does this say about these people? What does it say about this organization, this terrorist organization called Hamas, if that's what they believe?
In one of the houses, we were with a father,
We're down,
a Hamas terrorist.
just for knowledge, we're just down to the last minute. So I don't want you to cut off accidentally.
Aviva?
So we're just down to the last minute.
Okay. The Zoom will end in, okay, go ahead, Aviva.
So I just want to say that the Hamas terrorist had 2 of his kids with him. And when they threw missiles to Israel, he shot missiles to Israel. He clapped his hands with his kids and they said, beautiful. He's teaching his 2-year-old and 3-year-old children to hate, to kill. And that's what's happening there. We need the leaders of the world, all the world, to stand for human rights and to stop this terror. It can't continue. It just can't.